Welcome to another episode of Pilates Elephants. I am here with Phoebe Heyhoe. Welcome, Phoebe.
Hey, Raf. How are you?
I'm really glad to be here with you.
Me
Nice
too.
to have this conversation. I'm looking forward to it. So, Phoebe, I'm looking forward to this conversation because we were going to talk about something completely different, but
Yeah.
just as we were texting back and forth, just finalizing exactly what we're going to talk about, you just dropped this bomb of like, oh, by the way, I'm selling my studio at the moment. And I was like, oh, we've got to talk about that. Let's talk about you selling your studio. So this is an amazing opportunity for us to kind of catch you in the act of selling your studio in the moment. Like it's not, the deal hasn't gone through yet.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so to sort of catch your thoughts, your emotions, your reflections, your experience of this process while it's totally present for you. So, I want to go back and ask you all about your journey of studio ownership and all the rest of it. But before we do that, would you kindly introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hey, I'm Phoebe. I own a studio in Auckland, New Zealand, which is called MatWorks Pilates. It originally started as a mat-only offering, so hence the name. But we now have studio equipment where we teach on reformers, Cadillac, barrel, chair. I am an ex-professional dancer and kind of actually fell into the Pilates industry by accident, as dancers often do. And so it's been a really interesting journey of starting out with something that you just happen to be good at but don't necessarily love, and turning into a lifelong love. So, yeah, I'm really keen to tell you more.
So this was sort of like the arranged marriage where you fell in love after the wedding.
Yeah, totally. Only took 10 years. Just kidding.
All right. So tell me about, because the reason I think this conversation is so valuable. Well, firstly, I'm just really fascinated by Pilates business, and so I just thought, wow, this is an amazing opportunity for my personal interest to understand your journey. But I think that, something I've observed in a lot of instructors is that, a lot of us have this kind of ambition or desire to open our own studio at one point. That's, a lot of us dream of that. And I think, before I opened a studio, I didn't know what the fuck it was going to be like. I had no idea. And I think that's the case for a lot of us. So,
for sure.
So I really want to just have a frank discussion about the ups and downs, the highs and lows of owning a studio and your journey and what, why you got into it, why you're getting out of it, what you would do different if you had your time over, your advice, tips and tricks for new people, considering it, all of that kind of stuff. So tell us, like, how long have you had the studio and why, tell us about the genesis of it.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, I have owned MatWorks for 7 years now, but I've been instructing for about 10. And basically, I went to dance school in Auckland, got a degree in contemporary dance, and then was faced with the big wide world and what do I do with myself now in a tiny country where there is one full-time dance company which has 6 jobs available and doesn't have to change its dancers every year. So I started freelancing and was at a workshop actually with a friend who was a Pilates instructor in Auckland, and she was just telling me about how great it was as a career because she could teach early in the morning and then go do her dance rehearsals during the midday and then go back to work again in the evening. And it just meant that she was getting a decent amount of money but not having to work ridiculously long hours and miss out on rehearsals or classes. So I was like, oh yeah, that sounds like a really good time. Like maybe I should look into this myself. And at the time, my only experience of Pilates was that I'd done a couple of mat classes with a lady that we used to call Nana. at dance school. And my impression of it was that you basically just lie on the ground whilst somebody talks to you about sleeping kittens. And
Sounds pretty accurate.
Yeah.
No, not.
Try not to disturb the sleeping kitten. So yeah, I was kind of, I don't know, going into it with like a bit of a blank slate, I guess, and didn't really know what to expect. And I got this awesome opportunity to have some in-house training with a company in Auckland. And basically they trained you for a month on all 5 apparatus, and you didn't get paid during that month, but then as soon as you started working, you got paid, and you just had to commit to the company for 1.5 years, and that paid for your training. So it was really like so risk-free going into it. You didn't have to spend $5,000 straight off the bat and then pay that back, you know? So yeah, I did that, and, I enjoyed it to a certain extent, I think, because I am a real people person. I really love like connecting with people, and that was the side of the teaching that I really enjoyed. And I think I was just naturally good at it as well. And you always kind of enjoy something that you're good at more, don't you? I actually, I started my first business when I was 16 years old, and I really wanted to go to Germany on a school trip. And my mum said to me, if you want to go, then you have to fund your own way there. So I was like, God, how am I going to make like $6,000 in 6 months' time? And she said to me, why don't you just teach dance to some kids? And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess I could do that. And then she kind of ran the figures for me and showed me that if I got like 30 students and charged them $100 each per term, that within 6 months I would have $6,000. And I was like, that just seems too easy. Okay, let's give it a go. And I tried, and it was awesome, and it was that successful. And that was my first kind of taste of how easy it could be, kind of naive taste of how easy it could be to make some money. So I got into Pilates. I was doing pretty well at it, but didn't really have this like sense of fulfillment from it. I was just I loved moving, and I was trying to help these people to also love moving, but it was really different for them. You know, when you teach a dance class, people are there because they love the art form of dance. And so they're kind of like hanging off of your every word, or really engaged with their body and with the class and what it is that you have to say. And I found that when I was teaching Pilates, I was teaching, people who had just been at work for 8 hours and just wanted to come lie down on a bed and have someone else tell them what to do for once. And sometimes, not even listening, just kind of like if your arms were moving, their arms were moving because their brain had switched off. And so I decided actually that I was going to take a break from teaching Pilates and just like full-time pursue my dance career. And I actually moved to Melbourne and started dancing in Melbourne and absolutely loved it. And then for various personal reasons, I needed to come back to New Zealand. And then I came back and I thought, I kind of need a new reason to be here. I don't want to just go straight back into what I was doing before. What could that be? And I had this ambition. I think my whole life I've been quite tenacious, and that's like definitely served me with this career. But I really wanted to be able to go back into dancing full time and not worry about whether I made any money from it or not. And I thought, okay, well, what if I could use Pilates to try and build myself a semi-passive income so that I could have the studio and other people could teach the classes for me, and it could make enough money that I could maybe live off of it. And then I could just do some operation stuff when I can, and then I can go dance as much as I want to. And so I was like, yeah, cool. I'm going to start a business. Why not? And my brother, he had actually studied business and was chatting this through with me and was like, it could take you like 5 years till you get to that point, Phoebes. And I was like, yeah, nah, whatever. I'll get there in 2. It'll be fine. Just absolutely blind. Didn't know what I was getting myself into, but just had a goal and was determined that I was going to get there. So I in the process of kind of working at this other studio, I had been teaching in some quite like affluent areas. And one of the things that often really bugged me about Pilates was the stigma around it, that like you can only do it if you're a thin Caucasian woman and you do it in a bra top, you know? And I was like, how could I have an impact on this industry? Like, if I'm going to go into it and try and do the best that I can, what is that goal going to be of mine? And I decided that I really wanted to focus on making Pilates more accessible and more affordable for people. But I also needed to make me an income. So I started out with just running some corporate classes, like finding some corporate clients, making sure that I got a decent number of clients committed to every class so that then I could charge at a lower price point, and it was accessible because I was coming to them, affordable, but I was still earning an okay wage.
Because you learned from your mother and your brother, presumably, to do the math, and just like, okay, well, if you charge a lower price but get more people in the room, that can work out well.
That can work out, totally. And as long as I was earning more than what I would have been earning teaching for somebody else, I was quite happy. So I started with that. Then I also started doing some one-on-ones in people's homes, and they were kind of, various people that I had maybe met at a corporate class who then wanted to do a one-on-one session. And I charged more than what I would have earned if I was teaching by myself, but not as much as what someone would have paid if they were going to a studio, because I felt that those costs that are built in from owning a studio weren't applicable. And so that was suiting me quite well. And I ran the business for my first year completely by myself. And I think
and at this stage, you didn't have a premises. This was just you teaching
no
corporates
premise.
in people's homes.
Literally living out of my car. Yeah, my car was an absolute bombshell. And like, to give you some funny visuals, I decided that I really wanted a set of foam rollers because I loved foam rollers. And, I was only doing mat with people. So I was like, I want a tool. I bought this set of 10 foam rollers. And you know how yoga mats come with like a strap around them? I took the straps off my yoga mats and I tied them to the end of the foam rollers so they now had a handle. And I fit 10 foam rollers in one hand and then a massive suitcase full of mats in the other. And I was just like power walking along Queen Street with these foam rollers over my shoulder. I just must have looked like a lunatic. Probably still do, but whatever. So I was doing that. I was doing the one-on-ones. And then in my first year, I managed to make like $35,000. And for me, having come off like $17,000 the year prior, I was like, wow, look at me go. I managed to double my income. This is awesome.
And so you were like, roughly how many hours a week were you teaching at this point?
At that point, I reckon I was doing about 20 to 25.
And is that including the travel time?
Yes. And to put it into perspective, I charged only like $60 a one-on-one. Mm-hmm. And I tried to get most of my stuff in the city so that I could have less time traveling between. And I did manage to get like some people within the same building, for example, and be able to run them back to back.
And what's the population of Auckland?
Oh, no idea.
Like my guess would be like 1 million-ish.
Yeah, I think it's 1 million-ish. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was going okay. And then I just thought to myself over the summertime, how can I get some more clients? I really need to get some more clients. I'm not reaching my goal fast enough, and I'd love to be able to start employing people at some point. And I was doing some research online, and I researched about boot camps for whatever reason, and that was a great way of like not having to pay for a premise but being able to host people for classes. And I was like, yeah, cool, that's a great idea. Did my research, doesn't cost you anything to do it in New Zealand, so I decided to set up a timetable.
This boot camps in the park you're talking about?
Yeah, so Pilates classes in a park. I picked 2 different parks, and I set up this timetable of like 7 classes a day, 6 days a week. So I was like, yeah, cool, I'm going to like bust my guts doing this, but it's going to be awesome. And then
that's 42 classes a week, Phoebe.
Yeah, it's a lot. I was dead by the end of this.
Holy shit.
But I was also like 25, I was I've got all the energy in the world. And I charged people, get this, only $30 for the entire 6 weeks.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Crazy, like absolutely crazy. So I knew that I was only earning like $1 per class, like per client, per class kind of thing, or maybe even less in some. But I really wanted to be able to generate a relationship with these people. And I knew that in order for them to commit to doing Pilates with me and to really become my clients, they had to fall in love with me. And I also knew that if they were able to do it for long enough, that they could see some progress and see some results, that would really help to strengthen their connection with me and their want to stay with me. So that's what I did. And I was there at 7 a.m. every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Bet you look forward to Sundays.
I managed to get myself 100 new clients that summer. And I would say out of those 100 new clients, like maybe 45% of them were like really committed, to the point that they asked me whether I would find a community center for us to be able to continue doing classes together.
Where did you get those clients?
I literally was in the park all day, didn't go home in between, and I just
saw you.
Walked around. Yeah. I had signs, I had flyers, I tried to have conversations with people and ask them,
hey, you feeding the pigeons, Pilates. Ever thought of doing Pilates?
Precisely.
Yes, you with the little kids over here.
I even went to the extent of like making homemade smoothies and giving them away for free and giving them away with a flyer, and like going into shops and talking to people working in the shops. And I just did everything. So that seemed to work pretty well for me. And then I moved all of those people who were willing to commit and had seen what results they could get by attending multiple times a week. I managed to get them into memberships. And I kept the memberships still pretty cheap, but that just meant that if I had X number of people signed up to the membership, then I had X amount of money per week that was coming in from running these classes. And it made it way easier to figure out, okay, so I can afford to pay this much on hiring the community center 3 times a week. And if I hired it multiple times, I got a bit of a discount. And, it just gave a way clearer idea of how much money I was going to earn, rather than if I had just done a bunch of 10 trips. I think that would have made it a lot more difficult.
And you just set that up as an automatic payment through some payment processor online, right?
Yeah, and I actually signed up for Mind Body straight away, but it was back in the day when it was actually kind of affordable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I was lucky that I'd signed up to it so early.
All right. And so now you're teaching in the community centre. You've got 40 or 50, clients on a membership. You're teaching 3 sessions a week, shoehorning all those people into 3 sessions a week.
Yep, pretty much. 3 sessions a week, but 2 different locations, so it was actually about 6.
Okay. So you've reduced your number of classes by 6/7.
Yep. A significant amount.
All right. And so how did you progress to opening a brick and mortar studio?
Yeah, cool. So then after that, I got to the stage where I had a few too many clients for my capacity. So I started hiring some staff, and to begin with, I didn't want to hire anyone who was already trained because I didn't think I could afford them. So I actually just found a girl that I had taught dance to at some point along my journey, and she was really keen to become a Pilates instructor. So I did exactly with her what had been done with me, and I trained her myself, and she basically just followed me around for a month, and we fit training in between all of my clients. And so she got to have some really good hands-on experience and a lot of assistant teaching practice. And I had a whole month to just teach her the mat, and I'd only had a month to learn all 5 apparatus. So I felt like she was getting quite a thorough understanding within a month. And then that just grew. So over the next 4 years, I got more staff and progressed and got more clients and more community centres, and we built to 5 different locations as well as doing all of the mobile visits. And got to the point where we were kind of making...
Sorry, I just want to double click on this for a second. Tell me how much you're making in a second. Hold that thought. Where did all these clients come from?
Word of mouth, a lot. I continued networking as much as I could. So I joined things like the Venus Business Network, which is like a women's business networking event thing. I did as much marketing as I could. I signed up with a business mentor, and she actually...
What marketing did you do? Flyers, Google Ads, Facebook?
Lots of that. Because we had 5 community centres, I was able to send stuff out through their newsletters. I was able to put posters up in the community centres. I did a lot of like flyer dropping, and I paid my staff $20 an hour to walk around the streets in the vicinity of the community centres while they were waiting for their class to start or afterwards. And Facebook ads.
How many flyers would you give out on a typical run?
I would give them about 250 and just say, do as many as you can in an hour or whatever it was.
And this was like 3 days a week, basically.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And
so
we had a map that they would mark off where they had gone.
Right. So over the course of a month, over your 5 locations, like how many flyers roughly kind of sort of would you hand out?
I would print like about 1250 at a time, give those out to the girls, and then wait until they'd run out of them, essentially. Yeah, and we wouldn't do it every single month, but it definitely made an impact.
And then Facebook as well. And then you were just going to tell me how much you were earning.
Yeah. So we managed to go from my measly 30-ish grand in the first year to 72 in the second and 118 by the third. And this is turnover, so like what we brought into the business. And then by the 4th year, that was when I had this opportunity come about to be able to purchase a studio. And
so sorry, at that point when you're at 118 in revenue, how much of that roughly kind of sort of was profit at the end of the year? Because you're paying these instructors and you're buying flyers and you're paying for Facebook ads and renting halls and all the rest of it. So once you've done all of that, how much was left over?
Yeah, absolutely. I managed to make a profit of about 12 grand the first 2 years after having paid all my expenses and myself. And in the 3rd year, we just broke even. So,
but you were paid for your teaching, though.
I was paid for my teaching. Yeah. I wasn't making the mega bucks, and I definitely wasn't making the like passive income that I thought I would. But I was still happy that it was growing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think my experience also is growth often comes at the expense of profit.
Absolutely, especially because the more money that you put into marketing, that's kind of one of those things that brings about something positive the next year.
Yeah.
If you spend more this year, you'll get the results next year. So you don't always see it in the same profit and loss.
Yeah. All right. And so you did that for 4 years.
Yeah.
And then, so how did the opportunity come up, or why did you decide you wanted to open a brick and mortar place of your own?
So, like I said, my brother, he actually studied finance and business. And he, in the same year that I bought my studio, just bought his first company. And I was talking to him about this, and I was like, why did you buy somebody else's business instead of starting your own? And he just explained, well, the business is already making money. It's hopefully already generating a profit. And so you get to go, yes, you have to take a big loan to be able to buy it, but you get to go straight into earning yourself a wage and earning money to be able to pay that loan back. And so he was like, somebody else has done all of the hard work for you. Just think back about all that time you spent in the park handing out flyers. Somebody's already done that. And you just get to step into something and use your skill set to make it better and hopefully be able to make it even more profitable. And I thought, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, why didn't I just do that? But also, I didn't really have an appetite for risk when I was 25 years old. I wasn't about to go get a $30,000 loan and be able to start my own business with a loan. Like, I actually started my business with zero money whatsoever. And I just started with one-on-ones, and I did enough one-on-ones until I needed to buy some mats, and then I saved up enough money to buy mats, and then I did it. And so it was a very slow journey because I never wanted to get myself into debt. So I always had to wait until I'd made enough money to be able to afford the next thing.
Mm-hmm. I
think that was a really valuable life lesson to learn and to go through something that's challenging like that. But then I guess I was just scrolling through Facebook one day, and this studio came up, this post came up from a studio owner in Remuera saying that she was wanting to sell her business and was anyone interested in buying it. And I think it was like, here's the Trade Me link. And so I just kind of had these conversations with my brother, could see the benefit of buying another business, and talked to him about it and was like, what do you reckon? Should I inquire? Like, I kind of feel like I'm ready for a new challenge. And I also feel like this business is actually ticking away pretty nicely right now, to the point that I could actually step out and not be teaching as much. I've got the infrastructure around it that I could do that. So he was like, oh, absolutely. Every opportunity is worth pursuing. You just have to hold it lightly, because you don't want to get your heart so set on the idea that you're going to own this business and then have it not come to pass. So I did do that. I inquired. I always kept it in the back of my mind that I might not want to buy this business, or she might not want me to own it. And the more I looked into it, the more I could see all of these different areas where I thought I could make a big impact, and all of the benefits that would come from owning a studio. And basically it was my ticket to being able to get that passive income that I always wanted, because I'd only managed to squeeze so much out of the existing business that I had. But if I doubled the amount of turnover and then saved some costs, like on Mind Body, where I could be paying for it twice per studio, or I could just link them together and pay for it once, and all these other kind of similar costs that could have been merged. Right,
because each extra location in Mind Body, it's all coming back to me now, each extra location is a whole other instance that you have to pay for of Mind Body.
Yeah.
You had 5 locations.
Bullshit. Totally. Yeah. So I had a workaround. Instead of having those 5 different locations, I had one location, but the name of the class was the location.
Uh-huh.
It was a street address. And
Life hack.
Yeah, that made it way easier, especially because it wasn't like 20 classes a week at one location, it was only like 3 or 4.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
And so you looked at this Pilates studio that you're interested in buying, and you did the maths, and you realized that with the economy of scale, you could run more classes with the same fixed percent. Well, obviously some of your overheads go up, but basically the rent, was fixed, or the whatever lease. And so you figured, here's my opportunity to make that the proverbial passive income.
Yeah.
And so what year was this, by the way?
So roughly? I bought the studio in 2018, halfway through the year.
Uh-huh.
And then I ran them separately for a year.
Huh. You ran both,
I did.
The community centres and the studio.
Yeah. And the reason I decided to do that actually was because of some of my brother's advice, which was basically not to rock the boat in the new studio until they had a relationship with you. And I think that was really valuable advice, because if I had come in and just started making changes left, right, and centre, I think I would have lost a lot of people just out of the pure, principle of it. But I took my time to get to know them, to get to know my staff, to see how it ran, to see what was good about it and what was bad about it. And then eventually, once I felt like I had everyone on board and on side, I decided to merge the two together so that they would all become MatWorks.
I think
And
that's
even
really
though,
valuable advice. And if anyone's listening to this and considering buying an existing studio, I think you should really go back and replay that and listen to it about 5 more times. That you've got to build that trust with the existing clients, because you've got to earn it. You know, they might give you the opportunity to earn their trust, but they're not going to give you their trust straight away. So yeah, really
and
good advice.
people are just very resistant to change, even if it is good change, and it just takes them a while to see it. So they're more likely to get on board with it if they feel like you have their best interests at heart. And all of them were just terrified that I was going to raise the prices. For about the first 2 months, that was the only question I ever answered was, are the prices going up? And the answer was no. It's just staying exactly the same. I just want to get to know you guys.
All right. And so after a year, you decided to merge them. So that looked like adding more classes to the studio and stopping the community centre classes, right?
Not really. So it was mainly just a change of name, a change of website, and an online presence thing. And we kept offering still all of the same services. I just had to kind of rename them. So I renamed everything that happened at the studio as MatWorks Premium, and renamed everything that happened out in the wild as MatWorks Mobile. Yeah, and that kind of worked, but it also kind of confused people. And I would say that there are still some people who are like, what's MatWorks Mobile? I don't get it, you know? And I think that's because there isn't always crossover between the two platforms.
Yeah.
However, there has definitely become more crossover in the last year, mainly because COVID happened, and my idea of being able to generate this awesome passive income kind of went out the window with the negative effects of COVID. And I know, everyone suffered from it, and I just feel like it's, like a massive tip of the hat to anyone who's still open right now, because there are a lot of studios that haven't survived, and it's nice to be able to take a moment and congratulate yourself every once in a while. That was one of the best things I think I learned from the mentor that I used. Was I would never stop and celebrate, and she would stop me and say, go and buy a bottle of champagne and come back here once you've got it, and we're going to toast to your success, because otherwise it just feels like an upward slog all the time.
Yeah, because you're always focused on that next goal. As soon as you achieve one thing, you're like, okay, great, what's next? And yeah, it's really easy to lose sight of all of the things that you've achieved.
That you have achieved. And especially, I don't know about you, but running your own business is very all-consuming. And I know that you can kind of imagine that it must be, but it literally is. Like every single time that you're not teaching or doing some admin or texting somebody, you're thinking, oh, what could I be doing that I haven't done that I need to do? Or how can I make this better? Or, oh, I've got this idea. How can I implement that? And literally, it's quite hard to actually just switch it off for a moment and have some downtime. So yeah, to actually celebrate the things that you have achieved is super important.
Sounds like some of the things that you achieved, from the sounds of things, were, okay, I think passive income, I reckon it's a bit of a myth actually, but
yeah, me too.
Sorry if you're listening to this. That's just broken your heart. But I think some of the things that you did, it sounds like you really did do well, were because you did create not a passive income machine, because I don't think that's real, but I think you created a machine that worked to a large extent without you having to be the one, pushing it the whole time. So it sounds like you had people that did a lot of the grunt work for you in terms of, I don't know, I'm just guessing here, cleaning, admin, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
But so what did your job description look like? Now I know, I know you, like you said, you're thinking about it all the time, but it's like what actual tasks were you doing on a daily basis as the business owner at that point?
So I had the fortunate opportunity to be able to just not teach whatsoever when I first bought the new studio. And then I could just step in there and be there and get to know people and kind of run this not really existent receptionist desk and be on the emails and be able to just manage the place and see what needed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an awesome opportunity, and I put that down a lot to the amazing staff that I had at the time and how diligent they were, how hardworking they were.
So that was really client contact, right? So basically just interfacing with the customers to understand, to sort of get to know them basically.
Yeah, and I had the time to do things like go through the mind body that I'd just been given with all this, 15 years worth of data and go through it and research and look at what worked in the past and what didn't, and contact old clients who had dropped off and introduce myself to them and send out surveys and, do all the things that you wish you had time to do that you never normally have time to do. And so that was awesome. And then I decided, there were no stretch classes at the studio, and I personally really love stretching. And I was like going along to these classes, watching these clients, and the new studio had a lot of older clientele who were just by nature stiffer. And I was like, I'm going to start running some stretch classes because I've got the time to, and I want to, and it would be a good way to get to know people. It felt like a privilege to be able to make the decision to teach rather than teach out of the necessity to teach. That went on for a wee while, and then I started putting my finger back in the teaching pie more and more. And I think I realized throughout that journey that actually I don't really like being behind the desk doing all of the client management and emailing and admin, and I actually hate social media and I wish that I didn't have to do it. And so I got to recognize that actually those things are not my personality type, and I was better off outsourcing them because somebody else who does actually like doing it is going to do it better than I would. So I managed to find someone to do my social media for me and would still have marketing meetings with them, but they were kind of very independent. And I found a girl who really liked doing the admin, and she had a young baby at home, and it really suited her not to have to come into the studio and teach anymore. So that was great because she knew all about the studio and about Pilates and could answer specific questions, but also enjoyed doing it. And then I just started slowly wearing that Pilates teacher hat more and more, and getting my own clients into the studio instead of having to go out and about. But I definitely still did a bit of both. For a couple of years, I did a bit of in the studio and mobile. And then I guess after that, COVID hit. That really changed the landscape for everybody. We had to go into lockdown and teach everything online, and I found a lot of staff made big life decisions after lockdowns, come back from lockdown and 5 of the staff have decided they don't want to be Pilates instructors anymore, or they want to do it but they're moving cities. So we had a couple of years of a really changing landscape. And we just had to adapt to that. And I think always for the better. I've always managed to somehow get amazing people to gravitate towards me, and really have never been afraid of investing time into people. And over my 7 years of running my business, I worked out the other day that I've personally trained one-on-one for a month. Over 20 people.
Wow.
Yeah. And they haven't all stayed with me, that is a part of it. But I wanted to be able to really get to know them, to have a relationship with them. I wanted them to feel that I always had time for them, that I was never too busy to have a conversation with them or to invest in them. And I really wanted them to have an environment where they felt safe to be able to ask questions, to be able to not know the answers, and empowered to figure it out, or, come to me and we'll figure it out together. So I feel like that environment, I think some people wouldn't value that, and they would see that you'd spent time on 20 people that had not stuck with you, for example. But I just feel like what you give to your staff bleeds through your staff into your clients' experiences. And that was what was important to me.
Yeah, I agree. So that pretty much brings us up to the start of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so presumably you had to close the studio and you went on into online classes. Did you go into online? Yeah.
Yeah, yep, we did.
And I also know there was a whole bunch of stuff that happened in your personal life then. So you started studying with us in the diploma 6 months ago or something. Yep. And you had back surgery at one point.
Yeah.
And it's not just the surgery, because people say, oh, you had surgery. It's like, no, it's the freaking rehab that's the hard bit.
Yeah, totally. And actually for me, the rehab's almost been the easy part. Like it was the 1.5 year wait.
It was the pain before the
pain,
surgery.
Yeah, that was the hard part for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was actually in the first lockdown that I got an MRI done of my spine and had this terrifying diagnosis of a degenerate disc at L5S1. And I just had like the typical response, right? Like bawled my eyes out, was like, oh my God, I'm never going to get to dance again, regardless of whether I wanted to dance again or not, and had this weird conversation with the surgeon who said, this has probably been going on for about 15 years, and 30% of 30-year-olds are going to have degeneration. So it might go away in 6 months' time, or it might not. For a lot of people in this condition, the pain will come and go, and you might have like bursts of 3 months worth of back pain and then none for a year or whatever. But basically, let's just give it some time, see what happens, and then come back to me in 6 months. And if you're still really not feeling very good, we'll look at your other options. So I was like, okay, wow, can't believe that must have been going on for like 15 years. That's a long time. Maybe I'll make some life changes and see if that can help. And decided that I would try and take a bit of time off work and start swimming as well as doing Pilates, and see if the combination of swimming and Pilates made an impact. And then I went to see another surgeon for a second opinion, and he told me that he thought I was kinesiophobic, and that I just needed to work on accepting that I was in pain and moving through it. And suggested that I maybe try some PRP treatment.
People skills.
Yeah. Really great. Felt so supported. So I kind of was just like feeling a bit like I was on my own with it and not really sure where to head to. So I just kept going, really. Like I was just like, oh, well.
It's funny that, it could well be that what both of those surgeons said was, in one sense, factually accurate. Now, I can't make a judgment on the kinesiophobia thing, but, it may well be that it was factually accurate. But it was, whether it was or wasn't accurate, it was delivered in such a way that it had a massive negative effect on your confidence and your self-efficacy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's like, the fact that it was true or not almost becomes irrelevant to the outcome of that conversation.
Yeah, and it makes you reflect on how important it is, your delivery of information, and recognizing that the human in front of you has emotions that need addressing. They can't just be given facts and left to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I spent like another 1.5 years basically having a big fight with ACC about whether my current state was caused by an accident or not, and bawling my eyes out. ACC is accident compensation in New
Right.
Zealand. So government pay for your treatment if it is an injury or an accident. Yeah, and because this first surgeon had said, oh, this is degeneration, they had decided that that was not worth covering.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was bawling my eyes out every time I got another decline letter from them. And that went on for about a year, which was a really taxing process. And in the same time, the pain started getting a lot worse and a lot more disabling. And looking back on it now, I think a lot of that had to do with my mindset.
And the stress of dealing with the frickin' ACC.
Yeah, and that stress, totally. And so I ended up on some pain medication, which actually made me depressed, but I didn't realize that it was making me depressed because I didn't know that that was a side effect of it. So I spent about 8 months kind of doing barely nothing, teaching a couple of classes a day just to make sure I had a finger in the pie, but a lot of that time was just like spent in my bed feeling sorry for myself. And then I finally talked to somebody about it and realized that the medication was playing a massive role, and got my medication changed and started to feel a lot better pretty instantly just from the difference of medication.
You started down a road of like towards a really dark place. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Like you got some very bad medical support, and then you had those ACC, bureaucrats fuck you around.
Mm-hmm.
And, then you had this medication that made you depressed. It's like you were heading towards serious chronic pain situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a bizarre experience for me because I'm fortunate enough to never have experienced depression before that in my life and not even really struggled with my mental health that much. And I know that I'm very much not the norm there. But I'm actually really grateful for the experience, because now I can understand what it does feel like to literally have zero motivation, to not even want to get up and have a shower, and can just relate so much more with how disabling pain can be for a person. I think that really informs the way that I now approach dealing with clients and my empathy towards them. So I wouldn't change it, to be honest. I wouldn't go back and give myself a different medication because I think I learned a lot. Yeah, and it's cool that I got to come out the other side of it as well, and get to have a happy end to the story.
And you started the diploma somewhere in there as well. Was that when you came off the medication?
Yeah, it was after I'd come off the medication. I'd managed, once I got off the medication, I'd managed to start teaching a bit more again and was enjoying being back at work. And one of my staff members, shout out to Ruchi, she did the diploma.
Shout out Ruchi.
It was a funny journey actually towards that, where during the first lockdown in New Zealand, something popped up on my Facebook from Breathe Education saying, hey, you're sitting around doing nothing during lockdown, why not do this anatomy course? It's free. Here's the link. So I was busy writing a newsletter to my staff members about what they should do with their time off, and that came up. So I sent it off to them and I said, hey, use your time wisely. Here you go, learn something. And Ruchi signed up to it and absolutely loved what she learnt, and then found you guys and decided, I'm going to start this diploma. And so she kept it quite hush-hush. I thinking back on it, I'm like, how did you keep all that information to yourself for so long? But she just kind of trucked away at it and enjoyed it and mentioned things to me every once in a while. And while I was going through this really rough time, she would occasionally send me nice little screenshots of one of the pages of her lecture notes from that week that applied to me, and tried to give me little tidbits of information that she thought might be helpful. And then another of my staff members, who's also doing the diploma with me right now, Emily Moffat, she had been in the
Emily.
UK. Shout out Emily. Whoop whoop. Best staff member ever. She had been in the UK and had heard about you guys and listened to all your podcasts and done everything that she could that was free, and was like, man, this stuff is good, Phoebe. Like, how have you not switched on to this yet? And so when she came back to New Zealand and we got to have more conversations in person, and then we hung out with Ruchi, and then all three of us would just be talking about this content and this like new way of teaching, they both just fully convinced me that it was something that I should really look into and would be worthwhile doing. And then Emily and I were like, shall we do it together? Then we'll have a buddy and it'll be really nice. And so we signed up for the diploma. And that was in August in 2021. And we'd just gone into another lockdown here in New Zealand. So it was actually awesome timing because both of us were just sitting at home teaching kind of 1-2 classes a day online and spending the rest of our time devoted to learning this new stuff, which I think was particularly helpful for the first module we did, which was the lower extremity. There's a lot of content in there, but it's so great. So it was nice to have the time to be able to get your head around it. And then I finally went in for surgery in November of 2021. So I kind of expected that I would have like, I don't know why, but I thought I'd be in bed for like 6 months, you know, like unable to move, just like pass me this, pass me that. I've just had back surgery. But I was like so stoked with my recovery. It was so quick. And I definitely attribute a lot of that to my mentality going into it, because I'd already started the diploma and I could see that what your expectation of your outcome is has a massive impact on what the actual outcome is. I just knew that if I went into it with this really positive mindset and just knew or just told myself like this was going to be life-changing and this was going to make a huge difference to my pain, that I would be better off. And there was no harm from thinking like that. So that's what I did. And I ended up with a different surgeon to the other two that I had seen, one that I had much better rapport with. And he just gave me really great advice. Like, my only goal for the first 6 weeks was to try and be able to walk for an hour a day on flat ground by 6 weeks. So in the first week, I did 10 minutes a day every day. And in the second week, 20, and in the third, 30, and so on, until I was walking for an hour at 6 weeks. And just doing that simple motion, like, gets everything that needs to be stronger, and gives your tummy time to relax. I was unfortunate that I had an anterior approach to my surgery, so I have a nice big scar down my tummy, whereas I guess most people would have a posterior approach. But yeah, and then the next 6 weeks was do the same thing but walk up and down hills. And to be honest, by the first 6 weeks, my surgeon had said to me, don't go back to work for 6 months. And I guess that's kind of where the I'm going to be lying in bed for 6 months came from. But by the first 6 weeks, I felt so good that I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go back to work. I'm going to take it easy and I'm not going to demonstrate a whole bunch of stuff. But to be honest, the majority of my work anyway is standing around, walking up and down a room, talking to people. So I did. And I think that really sped everything up for me, because instead of lying on a couch all day long and going for one walk a day, I was walking around all day long and then sitting down for a short period of time.
I think a lot of times those post-surgical rehab recommendations are very over-conservative. I was told after my shoulder surgery, don't lift anything above 4 kilos for the first 6 months. It's like I'm doing freaking full body weight pull-ups with a 16-kilo kettlebell at like 5 months, you know. So
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. All right, and so when, you know, so the studio got to a point just before the pandemic where it was self-sufficient. You were teaching, so you were getting paid for what you were teaching. It was making break even or a little bit better. and then the pandemic hit, presumably just everything went to shit, and it's like one nostril above water. For the I'm guessing here, but that was the experience of a lot of people. I think was that
I think so.
how it worked out for you?
I think we were slightly better off than that. We definitely got some funding from the government, which made a difference. What year was that? 2020. Because I just merged the two companies together, we had that higher turnover in the get-go and then higher staff expenses as well to match, and then a similar amount of profit at the bottom. And so then in that first 2020 year, we basically just did half of everything. So we did worse off in general, and it would have been nicer if we'd done the double, but we didn't completely crash and burn. I managed to match all of the expenses with how much we were earning, if that makes sense.
Well
and
done.
We didn't have to pay for community centres because we weren't using them, and
So all right, and so we're now in end of June 2022. I don't know about New Zealand, but in Australia here we've been basically out of lockdown for this whole year now, 6 months at least. And so, when you came out of lockdown, sort of end-ish of 2021, was it back to kind of business as usual? And when did you decide to sell, and what prompted you to that decision?
Yeah, cool. So definitely January, February of this year were slower than ever before and got me a little bit worried. I was like, God, we're open and we're, spending money to run these classes, but we're just not getting them full. When are people going to come back? And like I said, the studio itself tends to have quite an older clientele. And so they're just way more cautious.
Infection, yeah.
Absolutely, and it's hard. You can't compete with that. If they're worried about it, you want to respect that and hopefully provide an alternative. But they often don't want to do the online stuff either, so they'd rather just have a break and come back when they feel safe. I was a little bit worried about what would happen. But then kind of March ticked over and things started to pick back up, and it's just done that every month up until now. So now we're kind of back to where we were pre-COVID, and things are looking a lot better. There was another question you asked me. Oh, what stirred me to look to sell? So I think the experience that I've had, or the kind of rough couple of years over the last 2 years that I've had, has worn me out a little bit. And I realized it's quite stressful having other people's livelihoods in your hands. And I wasn't sure that I was prepared to continue having other people's livelihoods in my hands. And I also have gotten to the stage now. When I first started my business, my motivations, or my goal that I was working towards, was getting back to being able to be a full-time dancer and not worry about money. And now over my journey, my priorities have changed to the point where I now am looking to start a family and would really love to be able to be a really active stay-at-home mum. And with that, my partner and I want to move down to Taranaki together, which is kind of in the middle of the North Island. So I thought about ways that I could make those things happen whilst also running my business, and thought about maybe putting a manager in up here in Auckland while I moved to Taranaki, and then flying up every once in a while to check in on things. And that's totally plausible and possible. But I wouldn't have the sweet relief that I'm hoping that I'm going to have of laying down in my bed at night and not having anything to worry about, or any person text me on a Saturday morning saying that they're locked out of somewhere, or someone texts me to say that they're sick and they can't find cover and now it's your problem. So I think I've just reached the stage where I feel like I've achieved a lot of the things that I wanted to achieve, and am ready to move into a different type of challenge for my life. And part of that is also that along the way, I really enjoyed all of the training that I did of teachers and realized that that is really rewarding to be able to educate people who are really interested in what it is that they're learning.
Sure is.
I'm sure you can relate. And for a while, I thought, maybe that was where I wanted to head. Maybe I would start a teacher training business myself, and that would be my next venture. And then I think I found you guys, and I realized that you're just already doing such a bloody good job at it. I was like, why start something that would compete with Breathe when you could just join them, So I think one of my ambitions is to be able to teach with you guys or be associated with you in some way, shape, or form. And the other ambition is I really enjoy teaching one-on-ones, and I really love applying everything that I've learnt, particularly to one-on-ones. I think that my teaching of classes has improved dramatically through my training with you, but I get a certain sense of joy from sharing a journey with someone who's struggling, who's going through pain, going through those challenges with them, and being able to celebrate in their successes with them too at the end. And you just get to know people so much better when you're working with them one-on-one in ways that you can't quite connect with people in classes. And I think that's where my love is. So who knows what the next wee while looks like, but I know it's definitely going to involve movement and I'm always going to be learning and striving for something. And maybe it'll include a little baby somewhere along the way.
Well, I'm sure that. Well, I guess I'm not sure, but I imagine. I'm pretty sure that your own personal experience, gives you a significant amount of empathy for people who are going through that journey and who maybe are fearful or feeling down about the whole thing, maybe in a lot of pain, maybe have been given conflicting or disempowering messages by other, well-meaning health professionals. So, yeah, I can imagine that you get an enormous amount of satisfaction when you're able to help those people and watch them sort of move through that situation and get back to doing the things that they find meaningful in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, sorry to interrupt, but I would say the biggest thing that I've learned from doing the diploma really is literally just around the biopsychosocial model, like recognizing that that's a thing, understanding what it is, and then understanding the massive impact that psychosocial factors play on a person's experience of pain or experience of movement or journey in general. And I would say, like, you and I had an interview kind of after my first module, and I was still at the stage where I think I asked you the question, like, how much of this Pilates technique thing do we let go of, and how much do we hold on to? And the identity that I had given to Pilates was that it was this set of rules, and if you fell within these set of rules, then you were doing Pilates, and if you kind of wandered outside them, then you weren't. And now my identity that I've given to Pilates is just so much broader than that. It's much more like you're dealing with a human, and a human comes with a lot of complicated things, and those need addressing sometimes. And sometimes the biggest impact that you're going to have on them is actually just your ability to give them a simple movement and congratulate them for it, or empower them to explore something themselves, whether they get it right or wrong. Not like, yay, you did 3 sets of footwork in 3 different positions and, now you've graduated to the next level, which is really cool. It's cool to recognize and to feel so much more confident with that. Actually, like, you don't really need to sweat all the minute details. If you're empowering someone and they're moving and they feel good, like, you're doing your job. You're doing it bloody well.
You are. And even though you're still not quite yet finished the diploma, you're almost there. But it seems to me you've already taken all of the important take-home messages from it.
Try.
But you never know. We've got the shoulder coming up. That might be different. Maybe the minutiae are important when it comes to the shoulder.
Who knows?
And it's not about psychosocial factors.
Maybe it's just about strengthening specifically the subscapularis.
Maybe it is. You just have to wait and see. It is interesting, isn't it? That and that's been my experience of teaching the diploma and teaching over the last decade or more. That there's a meme that goes around on social media that I see every now and then. It's got a picture of some supermodel saying, looks aren't important. And then Bill Gates saying, money isn't important. And and then I always imagine, someone in my situation, like I know a biopsychosocial practitioner saying, anatomy is not important, alignment's not important for rehabilitation. And the thing is that I've been I tried to convince people of that for years. And it was actually that anatomy course that Ruchi signed up for in sort of March 2020 or April 2020, whenever it was, where we had like 650 people enroll in that. It was crazy.
Amazing.
Yeah. That really, I decided to do that spontaneously because I knew a lot of instructors were sitting at home. I thought, hey, let's get together and connect over Zoom and geek out over anatomy just because it's fun,
Yeah. Just because I would find it fun.
And so, we just talked about this body part and that body part. We went into super detail about, cellular functioning and all the rest of it. And so we had a lot of fun. And it was at that point where I, through various conversations I had with people, probably Ruchi amongst them, that I realized that actually people, just like Linda Evangelista understands that even, freakishly good-looking people still aren't happy all the time and still have problems, And just like Bill Gates realizes that money doesn't solve all problems. It solves money problems, but it doesn't solve your other problems.
Mm-hmm. It also creates a lot of problems.
Right. And, but it's really hard to see that from the outside, right? If you're struggling to pay the rent, it's really hard to see how money wouldn't make you a bit happier, And I think the same way for a lot of movement professionals, Pilates instructors, it's really hard to see how anatomy actually isn't that important for rehab until you really understand anatomy. And then you go, oh, yeah, I get it's not actually that important. It's interesting. It's fascinating.
It's fascinating and you can geek out on it for hours.
Yeah. But it doesn't actually change what you do a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think especially all the stats that we get in our lectures around, what does make an impact and what we don't know about this topic, or all of that kind of really helps you build a picture of what is important and what's not important. And it's so much easier to drink the Kool-Aid once you've really looked at that research and gone, okay, wow, shit, we really don't know that much. Or, we've really done a lot of research in that area and we've proven that this is what's important and this is not what's important. It just makes it so much more of a natural process, to the point where, you can see what's coming up on the lecture for next week. And I think I wrote in my learning reflection, next week we're going to learn what to do for the neck, but I'm pretty sure that he's going to say reassurance and advice to stay active.
No, I've become too predictable. Well, that's great. I mean, as you know, we go into, mind-boggling depth in the detail of the anatomy through the diploma. And at the end of the diploma, you really do fucking know anatomy. But the paradox is you're much less concerned with anatomy.
Yeah. So true.
But you really know it.
Mm.
And yeah, it's funny. Well, yes, I do. It's interesting because it's sort of like the whole alchemist's journey of Paulo Coelho, where the main characters, I say you know because you're nodding, but for those who don't know it, basically this character goes off on this big quest, to find this great treasure. Then he goes, across lands and across seas and across mountains and across rivers and, talks to different people and has different struggles and challenges. Eventually finds his way all the way back to where the treasure is, and it's buried under his barn or something like that. It's like in his backyard, and he digs it up and it's like, oh, it was here the whole time. And it's a great little fable. But basically the meaning I take from that is like, well, sometimes you can't appreciate things until you actually go on a whole journey, and then you come full circle and you see things with different eyes than you saw, before. And so I think that's the journey that we've created with the diploma, is like when you come in, you think like, oh, it can't be that simple, like try not to worry about it and just get moving. You'll be right. And then you go through this whole journey and you learn all of the body parts and the anatomy and the physiology and the pathophysiology and the biomechanics and the pain science and all of that. And you come back to the end and you go, oh yeah, just try not to worry about it and get moving.
Keep moving.
You're probably right. But
you're
I think
so right. At the beginning, you just can't see how you would ever be that chill about it. Yeah. And then as you go through it, you gain this confidence along the way that just happens without you even realizing it, where you're like, oh, wow, shit, tissues are really strong. They can handle a lot of load. Far out. All right, why were we freaking out about, like, you're not in neutral? And then it becomes innate. And so by the end, there's like, of course I believe that. Why wouldn't I believe that?
Right. And I think you just put your finger on it there, where when you actually truly understand the tissues, right, you go, oh, fuck, they're really fucking strong. We don't need to worry about that. So it's only from actually understanding it that you can genuinely not feel anxious about it, because it's like you understand that it's robust and it's, not going to explode if you bend.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So the future holds for you, maybe associating with us in some fashion, maybe having some kind of offspring.
At home. Yep.
Maybe seeing some clients at home or online.
Yeah.
Would you prefer online or at home or in person?
I think I'd probably prefer in person. I quite like being in the same room, but I like online as well.
Are you going to keep any of your Pilates equipment?
I'm going to sell it all and then buy myself some really nice new stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's going to be
have
fun.
A dedicated Pilates room in my house.
Yes.
I'm so excited about it.
Yes. That is so awesome. I'm fortunate enough to have my own space. I've got a reformer down there, a bunch of exercise equipment.
So
and
good.
that is one of the things like that has made such a major difference to my quality of life, is having that dedicated space where I can just go and move.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's so amazing.
Some tunes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, I definitely highly recommend that. Well, so I guess, on reflection, in terms of your journey as a business owner, for all the people out there either, aspiring to own a business, or maybe people who are in the throes of, starting a business, or people have been running it for ages and might be very successful or might be struggling. It's like, do you have any general purpose advice for everybody? Like, what are you?
Here's the magic pill.
What are your reflections? What are your three bullet points that's going to solve for world peace for everybody?
I think I attribute a lot of my success to my tenacity. Just sheer stubbornness, really. I'm a Taurus and I just don't take no for an answer. So I will push until it becomes what I want it to become, or until I get where I want it to get. And that means sometimes really sacrificing things in your life. And I think, along the journey, I really sacrificed a lot of my friendships. And my friendships became the people that I worked with, and they were the people that I spent the most time with, and they were the people I wanted to hang out with on the weekend because they were the people that I had spent time with. And sometimes that can feel a little bit difficult to make those decisions, to make those choices of what it is that you're going to sacrifice. But I always had in the back of my mind this big goal that I was trying to get towards, and I'm really proud of myself that, I'm 32, and this year I'm probably going to sell my business for a decent chunk of money that's going to enable me to buy a house. And that feels pretty awesome, and I know a lot of other people, in different career pathways have reached the point where they can buy a house. But whenever it was hard, I just kept looking at the fact that, yes, I was paying myself a wage to work, but I was also building something that was bigger than me. And I was building myself an asset that one day would be worth something. And that was really motivating for me. I think I am I think I've always been quite financially driven. But I also had to find a real purpose that satisfied me for my day to day. And that was all about the people, just because I'm such a people person. Yeah. So that's a whole lot of stuff, and that's not said very eloquently. But I think maybe the key is decide your why and have a BHAG, have a big, hairy, audacious goal. And make sure that you check in on that goal regularly, and make sure that what you're doing is pushing you towards that goal, but that goal still serves you, because the landscape changes. We all know that now from COVID, that the industry can change dramatically, and your clients can change, and your own life can change. So if you can, check in on that regularly and just make sure that what you're doing is serving you, then I think you'll feel satisfied and be able to stop and have that glass of champagne along the way.
I would disagree about the stubborn bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because maybe you mean a different thing by the word than I do, but to me, stubborn implies unwilling to change, or digging in and not sort of giving ground. And to me, I see that you've displayed incredible grit. You've really stuck to, you've grinded out, those years of effort, and you've been very flexible with your course corrections. And you've decided that, you're ready to move on to the next phase of your life, and you're happily letting go. So that to me is not stubborn. That is flexible thinking.
Yeah, cool. Okay, we'll go with your one.
But I agree with you that, that having a why is really important. And I also agree with what you kind of implicitly said, is that you need a selfish motivation as well as something that's bigger than yourself. I think if you're just serving others and it's just nothing but a cost to yourself, it's that's not a recipe for happiness. No,
that's a recipe for burnout.
Right. But if you're just serving yourself and it's a cost to others, well, that's not a recipe for happiness either. I think, that way leads, spiritual bankruptcy. So I think you're right. You have to have both. And, for some people that that self-reward might be financial, for others it might be other things, but a lifestyle, but I think you've got to get something out of it personally, as well as you've got to feel like you're giving something and making the world a better place. And I think undoubtedly you have done that, with the team that you've, provided a living, for, and that you've provided experiences and trained. And I'm sure, Emily and Richie have, they've both spoken highly of you to me, and I know you've created an amazing work environment there where they've each flourished. And I can only imagine that your clients have, got an immense amount of personal growth and satisfaction and benefit from the business that you created. So, I don't know how I feel about the concept of legacy, but I think you've at least, you've cast a pebble into the pond, and there's definitely ripples that extend beyond your immediate self, and those
Yeah.
ripples will be felt, I think, by those people for a long time to come. And, I know when I look back at the people who've been, influential in my life in a positive way, a lot of them aren't aware of me,
Yeah.
um,
Wow.
and, it's like some guy I found on the internet who teaches anatomy in freaking Dakota or something, like, you know, um, and I don't know, but I'm pretty confident that, your clients, even maybe the clients that you didn't teach personally, but that were taught by people who you'd trained,
Who I trained,
that you've had a significant impact on their lives. And, so I think that's something that you should always, you can always cherish, and you've got lots of opportunities to crack open a bottle of champagne in the future, just on the back of that.
Just on a Wednesday night. Why not? Thanks, Raph. That's really sweet. I really appreciate all of that.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Phoebe. This has been a really, I guess, inspiring, fascinating, insightful conversation for me. Hope those listening have got something valuable from it. And thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thanks for having me.